Hey, what's up guys, Riff here. So today we're going to be covering multiple stories from the gaming industry, but we're going to begin with some updates regarding Dragon Age: The Veilguard. Now, as you can see, this game is struggling mightily. Only about a month after its release, the number of concurrent players has dwindled all the way down to 5,700 players. Obviously, things are not going well, and a lot of people are trying to guess as to what the sales numbers of this game are so they can determine how much of a flop this game is. Not if it's a flop, but how much of a flop this game is. Now, unfortunately, we're not going to get any official information regarding this. The Veilguard director has outright said they're not going to share any sales numbers for this game, but when you can't get an official source, it helps when you have an insider and a whistleblower sharing that relevant information, and that's exactly what we got thanks to this exclusive from SmashJT here, where he has a trusted Bioware employee who is leaking some information about the company, including some information about those sales numbers, as well as a blooming culture shift that might be taking place at Bioware and perhaps across the gaming industry. So let's begin with those sales numbers.
The insider revealed that BioWare's latest title, The Veilguard, had significantly underperformed, despite internally their quite ambitious sales target of 10 million copies to be sold within the first 3 months. The game has managed to sell, so far, over 3 million copies. Now, I did get these.
So, you heard a couple numbers there, and also the hat. He just had me feeling festive. Basically, we hear that number of 3 million, and just before we get into all of that, let's put a little asterisk next to that 3 million mark because there will be a further clarification on that number, and spoiler alert, it's actually lower than 3 million. But even if we accepted the number of 3 million units sold in about, 6 weeks since the game has released, that is an abject failure, okay? There is no way that is a profitable game given the sort of budget a game like that has. Other games with similar budgets to Dragon Age: The Veilguard, you would have to expect somewhere between 4 to 7, maybe even 8 million units sold just to break even. That is based on information we have seen from other AAA titles, and 3 million is just not going to cut it. And as you can see, the steam surrounding this game is completely run out. There is no interest. The player numbers have dwindled extremely low. The interest in this game has pretty much died. So they are pretty much stuck where they are at. But what's crazier than the 3 million number is the 10 million number. That is absolutely insane. That's not an ambitious goal. That is a delusional goal of trying to or expecting to sell 10 million units in just the first 3 months. They will probably never achieve that or come even close based on what we are hearing. But yeah, there's also a conversation, a further one to have, about why they need to sell so many units in just 3 months. People talk about a bubble bursting in the industry, and that's kind of where we're at with conversations like this. They kind of relate, and it's proving there's something very odd going on here as to why so much resources and time are being invested into games where they have to have these unbelievable expectations just to hope to break even. But let's continue on with a little more clarification on that number.
A specific number that they are sharing around internally, but I'm not going to say that here because I don't want anything to come back to this person. So I'm just going to say it's well over 3 million units, and honestly, that is shocking to me because the last figure I heard last time I talked about this was 1 million, and
so yes, his hunch here when he released this video about 24 hours ago was correct. This was a number we heard a couple weeks ago about Veilguard hitting 1 million sales, and that was according to an insider sharing info from a memo going around at the company, basically celebrating breaking 1 million sales. We also saw a similar report that claimed the sales of Veilguard were slightly below that of Star Wars Outlaws, which sold 1 million copies in its first month. And here we are with Veilguard, now out for about 6 weeks. And honestly, there is a clarification that's going to make a lot of sense. So this morning, SmashJT would make an update on that number. Apparently, another trusted insider at Bioware watched his video and said, yes, the information you're sharing is correct. However, there's one very important clarification, and it has to do with that 3 million units sold number. Apparently, that number is not currently sold units. Instead, that is their projection for lifetime sales. Yes, that 3 million is how much they predict they will sell lifetime. In reality, the number of units they've actually sold is around 1.5 million. That's half of what was projected. And again, that 3 million, even if it was currently sold units, was already a massive disappointment. They're at 1.5 million units sold. In fact, under 1.5 million units sold. And that is a nightmarish result for BioWare. They have just become the they-them Sisyphus who's going to be pushing this Veilguard boulder up a mountain for the end of time. They're never going to get to that 10 million. They're not going to do it in 3 months. They're not going to do it in 3 years. They're not going to do it probably in 30 years unless something absolutely insane happens. So this has been a gigantic failure for Veilguard, and you would hope that not just for BioWare, but across the industry, there's lessons to be learned. I say this all the time, and it's not really panning out, but I'm always like, there has to be a lesson learned here, right? You see what happens with games like this and how hard they fail, and these companies that are supposed to be making money would maybe say, what's going on here? Let's not repeat the mistakes they did. And maybe there's some introspection over at BioWare, but it appears there are some conversations going on and perhaps a blooming cultural shift going on, and not just BioWare, but also across the gaming industry. And this is what SmashJT is reporting further from that insider.
The message sent to me also shed light on the overall concerning atmosphere coming from within the studio. In a private group chat, not using the company's equipment being involved, I'm redacting any kind of specifics, but trust me when I tell you, more than 10 employees are together on this, and they follow my content specifically, among a few other prominent YouTubers.
Based, by the way, based employees right there. But a couple things to note there. I mean, number one, the fact that they don't feel comfortable discussing any of these things in a work setting. They have to go off on their own personal devices, I would imagine, to have these conversations is already telling towards the actual culture going on at BioWare. But I think a lot of people, myself included, sometimes make the mistake of overgeneralizing some of these studios and basically saying they're a giant hive mind, right? Everyone at BioWare thinks the exact same. Everyone's drinking the Kool-Aid. They're huffing the DEI. They're doing all that stuff. They all think the same. But in reality, just like any other big company, there's detractors. There's people who's looking to their left and to their right, and they're saying, what is going on here? This is not what I want to be a part of. And they are getting some criticism from YouTubers. And as much as people in the industry, especially games journalists, want to downplay what kind of effect a lot of YouTubers covering this stuff can have, it's clear that not only is it affecting the way gamers are approaching these various titles and how they're supporting them based on information being shared to them by YouTubers, it's also clear that people in the industry are noticing this too. And some people, instead of just kind of wafting their hand at these criticisms, some people are saying, there's something there. Maybe we should start listening to some of these people and some of these concerns, not just expressed through the opinion of these YouTubers, but what the YouTubers and their audience and the people who are listening to them and gamers at large are thinking and what they want and what they don't want. And you would hope that there would be a lesson there, but it's good to see some people are actually starting to listen at places like BioWare.
Use this private chat to discuss content critiquing BioWare's current state and how to use it together to improve the working conditions from within. And that's why they're reaching out to me, using YouTubers, social media, to be a voice for them, because they can't speak out internally still. They feel like they're being used to be blackballed if they decide to say anything out of sorts that doesn't.
Yeah, so that's a very good point. I mean, on the one hand, right, they're afraid of punishment internally, and that is the whole crux of woke culture, right? They make it so you feel like you're going to get fired or punished or ostracized because you speak out about what their agenda is and what they're trying to push in the company. But also, these people are afraid of speaking out externally as well. You are not going to see these insiders going to places like IGN or the other big games journalism networks because their agenda doesn't fit what IGN and those people are trying to share. So they won't listen to these insiders. They will dismiss them, or if anything, try to attack them for what they're doing. So instead of going to these hacks in the journalism scene, they're going to YouTubers who clearly are having some sort of a reach with gamers in a more significant way than other traditional sources. And that's why they're going to people like SmashJT, because they see the genuine nature of his care for the industry and things like that. And they feel comfortable sharing this information and knowing they'll have not just him, but anyone reporting it will have a more, authoritative mouthpiece on the situation and spread the message even further. And talking about this kind of building narrative here that these 10 people at Bioware in a group chat, and it probably, I would assume, might be growing. This is a good sign. It's not a sign that everything is fixed. Wokeism is defeated. Of course not. That's far from over in any sort of a way. But there is something interesting going on in the past couple of months. I think it's definitely noticeable that on social media and really across the internet as a whole, there is a growing vibe shift away from woke stuff. And it's not just, your typical critics who are saying like this is garbage, yada, yada, yada. The normal person, the person who normally hasn't spoken up the last couple of years, is feeling more emboldened to do so now. And they're not afraid of being canceled or threatened or having their lives ruined for criticizing DEI and woke slop that's been infecting many different avenues of life for years. So I think it's not a coincidence that there is a lot more insiders leaking info to YouTubers and alike, and they are tired of this stuff, and it's growing within these companies, this disdain for DEI and woke stuff. I just think the gaming industry is probably a little bit behind on this vibe shift. And, it's really hard when there's so much woke stuff entrenched in these studios. It's going to take a really big effort to do something about it. But you would think with everything going the way it is, especially with places like Bioware, where they are having a very hard time revenue-wise, you would think they'd start maybe listening to other opinions. In his video, he talked about how the leadership at Bioware is like, what's going on? What happened with Veilguard? We don't understand. When the answer is right in front of them, and they won't listen to anyone that'll provide those answers. But that is the current situation. I would imagine he's going to do an updated video. I'll put a link to this video in the description. You can check out any of his other content if you so wish. But let's continue on with a couple other stories we'll cover pretty quickly. Beginning with some more news involving Marvel Rivals, which has been doing amazingly in only the short time it has been released. As you can see, reported by IGN here, they have an impressive milestone of 10 million players in just 3 days, which of course it's a free-to-play game, but that's pretty irrelevant given the level of attention. It's a live service game, more players, more potential revenue sources. And you can see, as we talked about the other day, not everyone is happy about the success of this game. We covered this briefly in another video, but I have an update on this. So we had a former Blizzard president here who made this god-awful tweet, right, where they basically said that Marvel Rivals is an Overwatch clone, and he would get hit with a note and then eventually delete the tweet out of shame. But this claim that Marvel Rivals is just a clone of Overwatch is laughable to begin with, and just reeks of narcissism from this individual. But here, let's get an update on how things are going. It's been a couple more days since that tweet was discussed. As you can see, Marvel Rivals on Steam with a 77% approval rating, and the numbers have actually gotten better. That peak number we looked at for the first 24 hours has actually been broken and has now reached 480,000 all-time peak concurrent players. And right now, over 300,000 players are actively using this game, which is, again, very impressive. Look at the way this chart is flowing, very consistent up and down here. So yes, as you can see, going very well. How's Overwatch 2 doing? 27,000 in-game players with a 22%, yes, a 22% approval rating on Steam. But going down here, look at the numbers overall. You can see right from the beginning, they had their peak success in the first day and it immediately dropped off. And you can see the different seasons arriving, and interest is pretty much just stagnated ever since then. But there's something very interesting to look at here. If you look at the last week in particular, you'll notice right around here on the 9th, a player count of around 16,000 concurrent players. Now that is interesting because that's actually the all-time lowest number for this game. And back on the other chart with Marvel Rivals, on the 8th, just one day before this, they set their all-time peak so far of 480,000 in-game players. So basically, what an incredible set of timing right there. Marvel Rivals crushing it just as Overwatch 2 hits its lowest point all around the time this former president is saying that Marvel Rivals is just an Overwatch clone that has no chance for success. Very enjoyable to see all of that unfold. But let's go to the next story, an update that pretty much is going to be ongoing for some time, but worth mentioning. So according to Reuters, Ubisoft shares have been suspended after talks of a potential buyout. Now, this is pretty much inevitable at this point. There's going to be some kind of a buyout at this point, and there's been a lot of talks between them and Tencent and other investors. And it appears that there is kind of a wrench in this where the Guillermo family, however you pronounce it, is basically stalling things because they don't like how these proposed buyouts are looking because they won't have enough say in future board decisions, which is really funny. When you think about it, isn't that kind of the whole point of the buyout? You guys have been making all the decisions and they've been doing really poorly. They've been bad choices. This is why you're being bought out. Like, why would you want to have more say? How do you think you're going to sell that in the buyout discussions? And again, another case here of a studio getting bought out by Tencent and having their influence shifting over to Eastern markets. And it's really, again, is there a lesson being learned here where a lot of people have valid concerns about some of these Chinese studios like Tencent, but they view the situation like this where they go, yeah, I have my concerns about Tencent, but man, they're not as bad as Ubisoft, right? It's the lesser of two evils. And maybe there's a lesson there, and it's very evident how recently a lot of games from the Eastern market are crushing it, and a lot of Western studios are struggling mightily. Again, is there a lesson there? Who knows? But at this point, one more conversation about AAA games here, where IGN reports that skyrocketing budgets of AAA projects and diminishing returns on live service games have resulted in a loss of over 23,000 jobs in the industry in the last 2 years. And then we see that discussion about the AAA video game bubble bursting. Now, of course, this video has really demonstrated all the woes of the AAA industry and basically that a lot of it is deserved because it's the result of bad decisions and not marketing your games and prioritizing gamers in that sort of a way. But really, the notion here is that these massive studios making these AAA titles, they feel like they're too big to fail. And now they are, and they're scrambling. And hopefully, again, this starts awakening a cultural shift. I don't even care if it's superficial. It's better than what it is at this point. If they want to say, wow, this woke stuff we've been pushing, it's not working out. Maybe we should stop doing that stuff and start focusing on what makes gamers actually happy and actually interested in our games. And maybe they wake up. But really that fear of or that thought of too big to fail is getting demolished. I mean, we can look at Bioware since that's today's example. A lot of people years ago thought they were one of the studios up at the pinnacle. And now look at them. They're struggling. They're heavily criticized. A lot of gamers are mocking them. I mean, things can happen really quick if you keep drinking the Kool-Aid and going with all this nonsense that people hate. Now, we're going to end this video with one more post. This is just insane. So you've been watching the news. I'm sure at some point you came across the United Healthcare assassin, this guy Luigi Mangione, who's been taken into custody. The reaction to him on social media has been very bizarre. People expressing moral outrage, some people simping for the guy. But the thing that's very interesting is like people trying to get a sense of what he believes and going to his social media accounts. The dude is all over the place. But what's relevant to this is that he clearly had interest in gaming. And at one point, I believe he was an intern. He was actually like a bug fixer for Civ. But whatever. This post from the New York Post is insane. Okay? Regardless of any feelings you have about this situation, everyone in the world can agree this is garbage right here. So they say in this headline, Luigi Mangione played assassin video game Among Us with friends. Extremely ironic. And of course, they get hit with a note saying this is a tame game played by children and doesn't confirm or teach or encourage any sort of violence. And it's just an outlandish post. I mean, again, these journalists are doing everything they can to stay relevant with outrageous takes, but now they're just getting mocked, and even in this case, getting community noted so no one is collecting ad revenue on this post. Just a giant waste of time and another unhinged, weird take from a games journalist. Now that's going to do it for this video. Lots of gaming-related news covered today, so as always, feel free to share your thoughts about today's topics in the comment section down below. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. and I'll see you next time.